Thirdly, and the third major division, if you're a Bible marker, mark off 4, 5, and 6. And what that reveals about God is, in verse 2, His vengeance. In verse 3, His patience. In verse 6, or 4, 5, and 6, His omnipotence. Omnipotence. And look what it says. The whole idea of He rebukes the sea. When was that? That's the crossing of the Red Sea by Israel. He maketh it dry. Remember, that was the bigger miracle than pulling the water back, is drying the land out underneath it. He dries up the rivers. When did He do that? The Jordan River on several occasions. Bashan languisheth. Carmel and the flower of Lebanon languisheth. The mountains quake at Him. And these words show up later on in the book of Revelation. The hills melt. The earth is burned at His presence. Yea, the world and all that dwell therein. He is omnipotent. He's saying, I can cook this place whenever I want. Look at verse 6. Who can stand before His indignation? And, of course, it's a rhetorical question, but the answer is no one. And who can abide in the fierceness of His anger? No one. His fury is poured out like fire. That's what hell is going to be like. Liquid, dark fire for eternity. And the rocks are thrown down by Him. What do we see? The omnipotence of God. He's a God of indignation, a God of anger. He's a God of judgment. He can rebuke the sea and dry the land and everything else. But look at verse 7. Right in the middle of all this vengeance and burning, this is God's goodness, the goodness of God. That's our fourth point. The Lord is good, verse 7 says. He's a stronghold in the day of trouble. He knows those that trust in Him. I mean, He flooded the whole world, but He got Noah and his family out just in time, didn't He? He got Lot and his family out before He burned the place up. God is a good God. He's a stronghold. The Lord is good. Number 2, He is a stronghold in the day of trouble. Number 3, He knows those who trust in Him. He's got them down. And He is a God. Look in verse 15, because that's a continuation of the goodness. His justice is 8 to 14. But look at verse 15 of chapter 1. Behold, on the mountains, the feet of Him that bringeth good tidings, that publisheth peace. O Judah, keep your solemn feast, perform your vows, for the wicked shall no more pass through thee. He's utterly cut off. What is the Lord? The Lord is good. He's a stronghold. He knows those that trust Him, but the Lord brings good tidings, and the Lord proclaims peace. What did Jesus Christ come as? When the angels came, they said, Behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy. Jesus is the fulfillment of this. He says, Behold, the Lord brings good tidings. What's the best news the world's ever had? Jesus is coming. And when He came, He says, I'm the Prince of what? Peace. He says, peace. I mean, you see Christ in all these books? Christ is in Nahum. Christ is the just judge, but He's also the one that brings good news and brings peace, side by side. And that's the wonder of God's sovereignty. Well, let's look at the justice of God, starting in verse 8. And in my Bible, I got all those verses blocked off, and I put the justice of God. And this is what it says in verse 8. With an overrunning flood, He will make an utter end of the place thereof, and the darkness will pursue His enemies. What do you imagine against the Lord? He will make an utter end. Affliction will not rise up a second time. He says, they're not going to sprout back. I remember cherry trees. I used to be battling these cherry trees in Rhode Island, and we cut them down and put dirt over them, put a flower bed over it, and they just kept coming up. I mean, of course, it was this big around of a cherry tree. Must have had roots going however far. And so we were always battling those sprouts, and I'd do everything, spray it and cut it and burn it and dig it and chop it and chainsaw it and just keep coming up. God says, you know what? He says, affliction will not rise up a second time. He said, no, I mean, when I hit Nineveh, it's never going to rise. And it never did. It disappeared off the map. It was lost for 2,500 years. Nobody knew where it was until 1840. It's just gone. God said, when I do it, it's done. For they will be folded together as thorns, and when they're drunk as drunkards, and they shall be devoured as stubble full dry. You know, when they cut down the hay in a lot of parts of the country, well, down in Florida, they burn the cane fields. In other parts, they burn their, here, a lot of times you see the grass fires. God says, they're just going to be consumed like dry grass. And though I have afflicted thee, I will afflict thee no more. Verse 13, I will break his yoke from off thee. I will burst thy bonds in sunder. Because remember, Judah was, the northern kingdom was carried away by this kingdom. This is who took off Samaria. This is who deported all of the northern kingdom, the 10 tribes, the Assyrians. And God says, I'm going to break their yoke. And the Lord, verse 14, hath given thee a commandment concerning thee, that no more of thy name be sown. Out of the house of thy gods will I cut off the graven images and the molten image, and I will make thy grave, for thou art vile.